This piece of silver cast out Adam and Eve. It turned staves into snakes, parted and closed the Red Sea. Eris used it to start the Trojan War, and with it, a poor carpenter turned water into wine. Al-Mu'allim, August 1191. Hello and welcome to Visions of the Past. My name is Andrew, and I'm the host of this Assassin's Creed lore podcast. This is episode 59, and today we're going to talk about a piece of Isu technology known as the Apples of Eden. Before we talk about the apples themselves within Assassin's Creed, let's take a quick look at the inspirations behind the apples. The most obvious inspiration is in the name, Apple of Eden. This refers to the forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that Eve is persuaded by the serpent to eat, and then talks Adam into eating it, which leads to God expelling them from the Garden of Eden, a story that is seen within the book of Genesis. The forbidden fruit is not the only thing that the apples of Eden draw inspiration from. There's also an element in various mythologies, legends, folk tales, and fairy tales known as the golden apple. Examples of the golden apple seen throughout Greek mythology include Melanion using them in a race against Atlantia to distract her so that he could beat her in a race and gain her hand in marriage, and Hercules' 11th labor that required him to steal 3 golden apples from the Garden of Hesperides. Another example can be seen within the story The White Snake that was published within Grimm's Fairy Tales, where a princess asked a man trying to gain her hand in marriage to bring her a golden apple from the Tree of Life. Within the series, the Apples of Eden are either seen or mentioned within almost every installment of the series, the most notable exception being Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. While each apple has its own specific history, multiple apples have shown the ability to project illusions, control others' minds, physically manipulate a target, create a solid hologram, and the negation of the powers of the Staffs of Eden. The apples have also been shown to pass on advanced knowledge and manipulate energy. The Isu scientist, known as Phanes, implied that the apples were already being developed when he implanted neural controls that allowed the apples to manipulate the human race, allowing the Isu to have complete control over them. This continued until Phanes' hybrid daughter Eve, along with Adam, stole an apple from the city of Eden and incited the human Isu war. This war left both sides too preoccupied by war to see any other threat until it was too late. This included the Toba catastrophe that eventually led to the extinction of the Isu. While this catastrophe did not destroy the Isu's technology, it did eventually fall into myth and legend, but when one of these items were found, they often were fought over for their power. I don't have the time in this episode to talk about every known Apple of Eden. It could take days to cover all that. But we will cover some more of the well-known apples, like the ones Altair ibn La'ahad or Ezio Auditore carried in their lifetimes in later podcasts. The first apple I want to talk about we've seen in the glyphs of Assassin's Creed 2 and was mentioned within Assassin's Creed 3. This apple was labeled by Abstergo as Apple of Eden 5. This apple was recovered from the surface of the moon on July 20th, 1969 by the crew of Apollo 11. This apple was one of the dozen that was sent into space by the Isu during their third attempt to stop the Great Catastrophe. This was the attempt where they tried to use the human population to will away the threat. They were unable to properly place or control any of the artifacts, which led to the artifact's beam not being able to cover the world. The Templars discovered that this apple lay on the moon sometime in the first half of the 20th century. But within the 1960s, when John F. Kennedy was president of the United States, he wanted the venture to the moon to be a joint venture with the Soviet Union. This made him a target of the Templars, who eventually orchestrated his assassination, leaving their puppet Lyndon B. Johnson as the president, leading to the moon mission of Apollo 11 to be solely American. The next apple we're going to talk about was seen in Assassin's Creed Syndicate and the novel Assassin's Creed Underworld. This apple eventually became known as Apple of Eden 7 by Abstergo. This apple is first to have been known to be in the possession of Charles Pearson in 1862. Pearson used this apple as an ornament on his walking stick, not knowing what it truly was. But once it was recognized for what it was by the Templar only known as Kavana, a plan was set in motion to frame assassin Jayadeep Mir for the murder of Pearson and to obtain the Apple of Eden. During the opening of the world's first underground railway, Kavana stabbed Pearson to death and removed the apple from Pearson's walking stick. Kavana tried to use the apple to kill Mir and Ethan Fry, but instead caused the tunnel around them to collapse. As Kavana fled away from Mir and Fry, he tried to direct the power of the apple at them one more time, but was stabbed in the armpit by his assistant Marchant with the same knife that Kavana used to kill Pearson. Marchant then took the apple to the Grand Master of the British Rite of the Templar Order, Crawford Sterrick. The next we see of this apple is on February 10, 1868, when it's in the hands of Sir David Brewster, who was experimenting on it in a lab in Croydon. On this day, Brewster had a conversation with fellow Templar Lucy Thorne, who not only was second in command to Crawford Sterrick, but the Order's resident expert on the Pieces of Eden. Thorne, not happy with Brewster's progress with the apple, told him that he had had plenty of time with the apple and that he needed to work faster. Brewster experimented on the apple that day by exposing it to high voltages of electricity, trying to activate it. As the experiment progressed, Brewster entertained the idea of displaying the apple in public to destroy Charles Darwin's reputation. Brewster's assistant, Reynolds, objected to the idea, and Brewster laughed it off by stating that after unlocking the artifact's secrets, both Darwin and the assassins would be finished. Brewster did not see the end of the experiment, though, as he was assassinated by Evie Fry. The experiment, though, ended shortly after, as the apple became unstable and detonated from the electricity, destroying the lab and the apple within it. The last known apple that we're going to talk about today is known as Apple of Eden 4 by Abstergo, and was mentioned in the emails of Assassin's Creed, the glyphs of Assassin's Creed 2, with it first appearing in the comic Assassin's Creed Conspiracies, and again in Assassin's Creed Bloodstone. The earliest known depiction of this apple was within a 10th century Chinese painting, where it is shown as a flaming golden ball held by a small demon. What's most interesting about this instance here is that this painting is the earliest known pictorial representation of firearms, and that the gold ball is thought to represent an early grenade. Clay Kaczmarek hid a line of binary code within this painting when he used it within the glyphs that he hid around Renaissance Italy that stated Sumerian ME23. This hidden message seems to reference the apple as the Sumerian divine weaponry that inspired the Chinese to develop gunpowder and early firearms. The first individual that is known to possess this apple was Nikola Tesla, who found it within Croatia. When he began to attempt to make free unlimited electricity available to all, seemingly inspired from knowledge found within the apple, the Templars began a campaign to stop him. In 1894, Tesla was visited by Mark Twain, who admired the Apple of Eden. After Templar J.P. Morgan cut his funding, and Thomas Edison electrocuted an elephant to prove the dangers of Tesla's electricity, the Templars broke into his lab, stole the apple, and used it to drive Tesla insane. The apple was then granted to Edison, who used it to create several inventions, then passed it on to fellow Templar Henry Ford. Ford used the apple to manipulate his assembly workers to work for a lower wage, and sometime around 1933, sent the apple to Adolf Hitler. Hitler ended up using the apple to gain power in Germany and to lead the country to start World War II. Once Germany was under his control, Hitler granted the apple to Obergruppenführer, or a senior group leader of the SS, Euro Kramer. Kramer eventually worked with an abducted Nikola Tesla and used the apple to create a device known as Die Glocke, under the pretense of a nuclear project. This device served as an early version of the Animus, with Kramer hoping that the device would physically allow him to travel through time to recover other pieces of Eden for the Templars. The assassin Eddie Gorm was sent to sabotage the project, but was overpowered by Kramer and placed inside the machine. But Kramer fled with the apple when the Allies simultaneously stormed the laboratory. On July 15, 1943, Kramer was killed by Gorm and Julia Dusk at Kasia's castle in Poland. The two then took the apple to their superior, Boris Pash. Pash had been secretly working with Templar scientist John von Neumann, who wished to use the Die Glocke to travel back in time and kill Hitler before his rise to power. Gorm and Dusk learned of Pash's betrayal of the assassins on the same day they killed Kramer, leading to Dusk to try to destroy the apple with a hand grenade. This failed, only resulting in Dusk's death. Pash took the apple, leaving Gorm for dead, and on October 29, 1943, Pash and Neumann planned on using it for another time-traveling experiment, known as Project Rainbow, on the USS Eldridge. Gorm, though, killed Tesla to keep him from helping, but the experiment did continue. But instead of going back in time, the ship manifested in a future state for about 18 minutes, causing damage to the apple. After Project Rainbow, tracking the apple is muddy as it's next seen back in the hands of Hitler when he was killed by the assassins on April 30th, 1945. By 1957, it was back in the hands of John von Neumann when Boris Pash killed him on February 8th to take it for himself. With the apple in his control, Pash started Project Bluebird under the direct order of CIA Director William King Harvey. On the surface, Project Bluebird was to research mind control techniques to better interrogate people, but Pash hoped to give humanity back their true freedom that was taken from them by the Isu, by granting them access to the memories of all their ancestors. One subject in particular was Julia Gorm, the daughter of Eddie. Using Project Bluebird on her, Pash gave her the skills of Eddie, as well as his urge to kill Pash. On August 2nd, 1964, Alexei Garvani caught up to Pash and what was left of his Bloodstone unit, after spending almost the last year hunting the unit in the Ninh Bun region of North Vietnam. After ambushing Pash and his unit, Alexei revealed that he was looking for the apple. Revealing they left it on the island of Hon Mei, the unit told Alexei that in exchange for the exact location, he had to escort them to the Catholic Diocese of Phat Diem in time for Pash's daughter to be born safely, because the group was being hunted by Julia Gorm. Eventually, Julia caught up to the group, killing most of them, though Alexei stopped her, seemingly at the cost of his own life. During the battle, Xenia, who was close to giving birth to Pash's child, was hit with a knife, leading her to tell Pash to call for Alexei's transport to get them, leaving him to choose between her and the child, or the location of the apple, knowing that that information would be the only way they'd leave North Vietnam. 2 days later, on the USS Maddox, William King Harvey was in possession of the apple and explained to Pash how the last few days would lead the U.S. into the Vietnam War. During this conversation, Pash realized that Harvey was a double agent now working for the Templars, and that instead of killing Pash, Harvey was going to use his knowledge of the apple for the Templars. When Pash objected, based on the failures of past projects with that apple, Harvey explained that some progress was made with Julia, leading her to be his new agent Q.J. Wynn, and introduced him to Warren Vidic, who was holding Pash's child. Harvey then explained that his child would be left in the care of Vidic to ensure Pash's loyalty. Vidic took the apple and Pash's research and tested early animus designs on Pash's daughter Natalie. In 1977, after spending time in her father's life, she discovered that she was a prisoner and stole a copy of the animus's blueprints and gave them to William Miles. She then escaped the lab with the Apple of Eden. Over the next 40 years, Natalie kept the apple, eventually using it in the Swiss Alps to power her version of the Project Bluebird machine. Natalie planned to use this machine to wake consciousnesses to genetic memories, hoping a more evolved human would lead to the end of the Assassin-Templar War. And to test this, she planned to turn a machine on the town of Grimmelwald, using 5% of the apple's power. On November 15, 2017, during this test, Tomo Sakagawa, a Japanese assassin who was hunting Julia Gorm's son Maxime, who killed his mother during the Great Purge, tracked him to the facility. Working his way through the facility, he killed Maxime Gorm, who was reliving the memories of his mother to give Natalie more information about her father, and saved Eliza Adler, an amnesiac whose parents tried to find the Apple of Eden to restore her memories. During the mission, Tomo sent Project Bluebird's equipment into lockdown. He ended up confronting Natalie to trade the phone that could turn off the lockdown for a helicopter. While leaving, Tomo instead used a Trojan horse to disable their cooling systems, causing the lab to explode, presumably killing Natalie and destroying the fourth apple of Eden. While those are not the only known apples of Eden, those are the only ones we'll be talking about today, and we will talk about the other 6 known apples of Eden in future podcasts. There is, though, more instances where apples were used throughout the history of Assassin's Creed that are not necessarily tied to the 9 known apples. One apple was stolen by Eve, the hybrid daughter of Phanes. This event presumably was one of the main events that started the human-Isu war. It's also suggested by Clay Kaczmarek that it was this apple that caused Cain to murder his brother Abel. Other feats suggested by Clay to be from or about apples of Eden include Heracles stealing apples from the Garden of Hesperides, and Idun being the caretaker of apples that were said to ensure the Norse gods' vigor and immortality. Speaking of the apples of Idun, in 870, Eivor Varin's daughter and a thrall by the name of Gull went looking for a special treasure and came across the Temple of Heimdall atop the Falkenstoffer Mountains within Norway. Here, they found an apple after a fight with Bjarke Broadside and Erlend of the Wolfing clan. Eivor found a secret treasure room behind a painting of Heimdall's home, Heimbjorg. Within this treasure, Eivor found an apple of Eden, but Gull attacked her over the ownership of the treasure. Gull then grabbed the apple herself, claiming it to be one of Idun's. The apple awakened Gull as a sage, allowing her to use the apple to freeze Eivor in her place, and after a brief conversation, the temple fell apart around them, leading to Gull's presumed death and the loss of the apple itself. Kairos of Zarax discovered an apple in an abandoned temple of Aphrodite atop the highest peak in Arcadia in the 6th century BC, and used it to win a foot race and the hand of Princess Atlantia of Arcadia. In 1402, Lei Tong, the daughter of 2 assassins, fled an execution order from the Yongle Emperor with another unnamed apprentice and an apple. During the coronation of Charles II of England on April 23, 1661, he noticed General George Monarch speaking to a man holding a sphere wrapped in a cloth, but he had to bow his head to receive his crown before he could look any further. The last instance of an unknown apple was seen in 1839 when the assassin Arbaz Mir and his servant Raza Sora explored the first civilization ruins in the caverns beneath Ranjit Singh's summer palace in Amistar. Among these ruins was a statue of Durga holding several pieces of Eden, one of which was an apple. While it's possible that the apple of Eden that Charles II of England saw was the exact same one that Queen Elizabeth had during her coronation, and it's also possible that the one seen by Arbaz Mir was the same that his son Jayadeep was chasing in the underground of London, this is something that has never been confirmed. According to the known history of Assassin's Creed, if there is a conspiracy or a questionable moment in human history, it was probably done with some kind of apple of Eden. Usually, they are shown in the hands of powerful people who use them to control either a vast number of people or a large area of land. They were also used to explain conspiracy theories like why the human race went to the moon or what really happened with the USS Eldridge. While it's a great way to explain many things, it's also been used way too much. There are so many other great pieces of Eden that going back to the apples so many times make them feel less special, even though showing them more often does give them a greater feeling of importance to the Isu. Along with showing the greater importance to the Isu, the more often the apples are shown, it shows how important they are to the Assassin-Templar War as well. Showing Boris Pash willing to work with a Templar to stop World War II from happening, leading to some assassins thinking he's a traitor, even though he's more of an extremist at the time, and then completely folding to Templar pressure after his assassin mentor turned out to be a double agent, and then how much of an extremist his daughter ended up being, even though she still considered herself an assassin. As much as I enjoy the apples overall and their role within Assassin's Creed, I think setting them aside for another piece of Eden for the time being wouldn't be a bad idea. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for new episodes. If you love the Visions of the Past podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts. If you have any questions about Assassin's Creed or topics that you'd like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at visions_AC, and you can find those links in the show notes below. Until next time, my assassin friends, make sure to follow the Creed. And to those Templars listening, may the Father of Understanding guide you.